Deep Red. Also, The Hatchet Murders is another title this film went under. This is a Dario Argento film from 1975. And for me, I think it's his best film. He's made a lot of films, a lot of thrillers, a lot of giallos. He's, I guess, the father of giallo films. He's the Italian Hitchcock. Profound director. What are your thoughts?
To be honest with you, when it comes to giallo films, I don't know what it is with them, but I have a hard time just understanding them, getting them. I know they're very popular. I just don't have the same appreciation for them, and I don't know why. I seem to be one of the only ones who are fans of this genre, horror especially, to kind of feel that way. But I'm thinking back, he made the movie Phenomena, which is also called Creepers in this country, which I really, really enjoyed. But he also made like Tenebra and Inferno and Terror at the Opera. And of course, this one is one of his famous ones. I can't get into them, and I don't exactly know why. With the exception of Phenomena, I'm just not a huge fan of these types of films. And again, maybe I'm the odd one out, but I just have a tough time getting into them for whatever reason.
Do you like slasher films?
Love them. Stupid as they may be, love them.
But you do get that this came a few years before slashers, and slashers heavily borrowed from a lot of the tropes that are in these Italian thrillers. The childhood trauma, as being the origin for the killer, the edged weapons, the creative kills. There's a lot of things that are borrowed from this into slashers, and that you just think they took the best parts and left all the stuff you don't like out. Was that it, or?
I think again, me personally, I'm not a big fan. These films seem a little artsy to me. And I maybe I just don't have an appreciation for it.
No, I understand why you don't like these, but what I'm saying is you like slashers despite the fact that slashers borrowed so much from these. So what is it that slashers took? Like I don't know if I'm explaining this right, but you like one thing and you hate another, but they're two things that are so similar. It's like saying I hate red apples, but I love green apples. It's like they're really similar to hate one and love the other.
Yeah, again, I don't want to say that I hate these types of films because I don't hate them. But I want, maybe if you want to compare the two, I think I would maybe say slashers are kind of a lot of slashers anyway are just kind of a dumbed down version. And maybe that's just where my intellectual level is for these types of things. I like to think I'm not a dumbed down fan, but maybe for this type of genre I am. I don't know. I just could never seem to fully grasp an appreciation of these. And I've seen a lot of them, and I've seen some of them multiple times. I've seen this one a couple of times, but they just don't strike me as much as I wish they would. I always get excited when I see one of these for the first time because people build them up so high, but for whatever reason I just find myself just not quite following them quite right, and I don't know what that is, with the exception of Phenomena, which I thought was a phenomenal movie. Yeah, I don't have a full good reason to give you.
Okay. Yeah, as much as it may seem like I disagree with you, I'm actually somewhat on the same page with you in that I've seen a ton of giallo films myself, or giallis, and they aren't, to me, as interesting as slasher films. I find with slashers, part of it is a cultural difference. I think there are things that different cultures do that may be more acceptable or maybe more relatable. And I think with foreign films, a lot is lost in translation. Like almost literally, you lose the nuances of performances. You lose a lot of being in that culture every day, of things that you may find funny or things that you may find interesting. I think that's part of it. And also, I like you, I think artistically there's something that's very artificial about these gialli films, in that they don't come up, not saying that slashers are realistic, but at least they look like a movie. Some of these look like stage plays. There's a lot of the story doesn't seem like plausible. and again, not saying that slashers are extremely plausible, but they're a little bit more grounded and a little bit more relatable, as far as with the characters and the situations than you would find in a giallo film.
Yeah, I was going to say the same when you talk about plausible. I mean, this film in particular, the whole aspect of him finding that picture behind the sheetrock in that house, and the girl with the picture with the same thing. Uh, yeah, it's stylish. I just don't. It's not plausible to me. Again, not that slasher movies like Jason are plausible, but I don't know. I don't know. I don't have a
Yeah.
great answer for you, but
Yeah, I
yeah,
mean, you can, the idea of people wanting to like do drugs and smoke weed and have sex, young people want to do stuff. Yeah, you could see that happening, and the
sure.
fact that there's this guy who has this twisted backstory that just doesn't want anyone to be happy and just wants to kill people. It's a story you can get into. It's a little bit more. I wouldn't say. I guess a little bit more nuanced, but again, also a lot not really relatable. A lot of these films have a character. It's generally a guy, and he definitely feels, it's almost noirish in that he feels like out of place in his surroundings. It's a little bit existential, like him questioning things around him, and that leading into him questioning something that happened that he saw, generally like a murder or something, and then he goes on this investigation. That's what happens in this, and that's what happens in a lot of these things. It's generally an everyday guy going on this investigation and trying to figure out what happened in this situation.
Yeah, and that in itself strikes me as implausible. I can't imagine a real life situation, and you're right. This happens in a lot of these types of films. I can't imagine a real life situation where a common, everyday, regular guy would suddenly team up with a reporter or a detective or somebody else, and the two of them are looking into this. That just doesn't seem that doesn't seem real to me. But
Mhm.
that's a very common theme with these types of films.
Yeah, and I'm not a fan of the stories of these films, and not necessarily with this either, because there isn't much of a story. A psychic uses her powers, realizes someone in the audience is a murderer, and then that triggers the murderer to say, "Hell, I have to kill this psychic," and that kind of sets things in motion. Where our lead character sees the psychic dead, he goes into the apartment, and again, like, why are you doing all this stuff? Just call the cops. He goes into the apartment, gets his fingerprints everywhere, and takes her off the glass or whatever, lays her down, and he notices after the cops come and leave that there was a painting that looked awry. And one thing I do like about the story in this, that there's not a lot I like about the story, but we do see the murderer at the beginning, so they don't cheat with red herrings. You see the killer right at the beginning. It's just a matter if you notice the killer. She is in the reflection that he sees, and he thinks there's a painting that's missing. I don't know why thinking a painting's missing should be the catalyst for I want to find this murderer, or like how that's a clue to like set you on your mission. But that's the catalyst for it. And after everything is kind of figured out, he realizes it's not a painting missing; it was a face from the painting, and that was the actual killer. And the killer, again, this had elements, again, with the Hitchcock stuff, in reference to him being the Italian Hitchcock. You have the psycho aspect of the story where you have this, again, Bates could have been considered a gay character. This was definitely a gay character with mother issues, and the mother's like, this killer in this, and with Norman Bates, he was actually the mother. But that's a subgenre of horror films in general, is a guy obsessed with his mother and things like that. So it's not clear. I guess he may have just killed the reporter, the son, and maybe the mother killed everyone else. But why she's killing these people, there's certain information they have that you could see it's plausible why she would want them dead, but there's no way of, the movie explains why she would know that information. Like, we know in the information watching the film, okay, the detective figured this out. He knows who the killer is. But how does the killer know that the detective figured it out? You know, it's like stuff like that doesn't really make a lot of sense in the story.
Yeah, no, but overall, you've seen a lot of his work. This particular director, Argento, this is your favorite of his so far, or at least from what you've seen?
Yeah, it definitely is. I mean, from a filmmaking standpoint, there's a lot of stuff that I see in there that I recognize as like, okay, this took a lot of hard work, and I can appreciate that. I see a lot of the tropes and a lot of the motifs that's in there. You have the childhood imagery contrasting with the brutal violence, which you see throughout the film, and then it plays into the end of it. You have the doll hanging on the rope being killed, and the puppet being smashed open, and you see the girl being slapped. You see, because she put a pin in the lizard. So there's a lot of constant imagery of like childhood things mixing with like brutal violence. I recognize that. I appreciate that. There's a gender politics and the gender interaction where the lead character is kind of emasculated a lot. He loses the arm wrestling match. The girl forces him to like sit in the side seat while she drives. His seat collapses. He's looking up at her. There's uh, the transvestite, where it's actually an actress playing a guy who's playing a woman. You have that whole kind of parallel going there. So there's a lot of things in there like that. The camera has a lot of different points of view, which I don't necessarily love, but I notice in that the camera sometimes can be the point of view of the killer, then it can be the point of view of the person running from the killer, then it can be just this wide perspective, and it can all be in one scene where the camera is just shifting a lot. It's a little disorienting. I'm not a big fan of it, but I notice it's something that he's doing on purpose. And one last thing I'll mention is the whole paintings aspect of it. You have the paintings in the psychic's home, but also the whole film looks like a painting at times. Where if you really notice in the background, a lot of the extras barely do any moving at all. They're almost just standing still as we just watch the actors in the foreground. And there's the Nighthawks painting that was replicated. I'm not sure if you're familiar with the Nighthawks painting, but it's that diner scene where it's a man sitting alone in a diner and there are a few people behind him again
I think I know what
sitting.
you're talking about. Yeah.
Yeah, and they recreated that in this film and they go back to it a lot. So there's a lot of stuff like that I appreciate from a filmmaking standpoint, but all the other stuff I kind of agree with you with. But I think what we both can agree on is the score was amazing.
Yeah, the score was fantastic. A lot of these do have wonderful scores. Let me ask you this also, because this movie was in the public domain, so there's several versions of this floating around. I have this on like 3 or 4 different DVD compilations. Now, I mentioned the movie Phenomena, which he made. I saw that movie years ago in the 80s. It was released under an alternate title in the US on VHS. The movie was okay, nothing special. However, when I got the Blu-ray a couple of years ago and watched that, it was 15, 20 minutes longer and much more coherent. I enjoyed it quite a bit. I'm wondering, I know there's nice, good Blu-rays of this movie out there as well. One of the copies I put in today was only 60 minutes long, which I thought that's absurd. So I found another DVD which which was 100 minutes long. So I watched that one instead. But digging into this movie, looks like there's 2 hour and 6 minute versions. There's longer versions. I'm wondering if I were to see a complete uncut version, which is out there, would I appreciate it more? And I might, because I certainly did it with Phenomena. I'm curious how long your version was, because that lizard scene you mentioned, I read about that. My version did not have that scene.
I have not seen Phenomenon. I have seen the longer version of this. That was the one I watched, the one that's over 2 hours long.
Okay.
And what you're getting is you probably wouldn't like the longer version, to be honest with you. Um, it, it's hard for me to say, but I would lean towards you probably wouldn't, because it just it expands the story, but I use story in quotes because there is no story. It just really expands the themes of what's going on. So if you're not a fan of what you're watching, all you're getting is more of what you're watching.
Okay.
There is no
All right.
filling in the blanks because it's just he's on this mission to find a murderer. That's the canvas almost for the story, and that's it. It's like he's on the mission to find a murder. Everything that's in there is just, it's just a lot of filling in the blanks. There's no A to B to C to D. There's nothing like that. So when they take something out, it's not like, man, they went from B to F. Like, what did I miss? You're not missing anything. It's just more of the same. And
Okay.
for me, I don't mind because I like the themes, but it's just more of him arguing with the reporter. It's just more, a lot of that was cut out. I think what was cut out of the version you may have seen was the Jewish funeral. They really harped on the Jewish themes, but that didn't really pay off. But again, that may be a cultural thing. Maybe at the time things were going on in the country that I'm not aware of in the mid 70s in Italy. Yeah, a lot of that was cut off, was just dialogue scenes that didn't advance the plot. It was just like a lot of banter. Again, I would recommend it from the artistic standpoint of the film. If you're not that into it based on what we said, I would probably recommend getting the shortest version possible, because the best thing about the film is the kills. And no matter how short the version is you get, that's what really sells the film, and you're going to get all the kills in the shorter version. What about yourself? Any final thoughts on the film?
Yeah, well, I can tell you there is a 60-minute version out there because I own it. Um, that seems ridiculously short, but yeah, I would still recommend this to people because I know I'm somewhat in a minority amongst people who watch films like this. So I don't think my opinion is fully the best one to take. So I do know this is a very well liked film, so I would definitely recommend it. Make your own judgment on it.
So, real quick before we wrap up, are there any artistic films that you like? Is that, or do you just not like artistic films at all, or is it just this particular genre?
Um, I have an appreciation for artsy films. You know, I make a point every year to see all the movies that have been nominated for Best Picture, or Best Actor, Best Actress, and there's some artsy films in there, and they're usually pretty well done. I don't really necessarily have the problem with that. As long as the story is interesting, I'm okay with it. Entertain me on some level. But I don't know, something about Giallo's just doesn't sit right with me, and I don't know exactly what it is. I've had some appreciation for Suspiria, but then I've seen that one a few times over the years, and now that one's not as good as I remembered it being. But then again, you take a look at something like Phenomena, which I didn't like. I like that a lot more too. So I'm inconsistent. Um,
As we
but I
all
wouldn't.
are.
Yeah, I wouldn't say I have a distaste for artsy films. As long as you can entertain me, I'll be happy.
Mhm. Yeah, and I don't want to get this confused. We're not necessarily saying Giallo films are high artistic, but this one particular film is high art. But yeah, Giallos, they're just popcorn movies in general. This one does try to inject a lot of art, but a lot of times when you focus on the art and the shots and things like that, the story generally does take a back seat. And if you're someone that likes to follow a good story, and that's not the focus of the director, that's when you can get stuff like this where you just feel apathy towards what's going on screen and you're not really that engaged.